Hold on, I'm coming. Hold on, I'm coming. I'll be right with y'all. Give me a minute. I got to get my coffee. Got to get it, got to get it, got to get it. Just hold on. And I'm coming. You. What's happening in the neighborhood? It's a beautiful day. I don't want to leave you, but I refuse to let you go. If I had to. Well, did that one before too, y'all. Yeah, I come. Hold on. I'm coming. Hey, y'all. Good morning. Welcome to Daddy's Right Here Live. I'm your host, as always, Sabir Alim. Hey, man, listen. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Another day above that. So spots up the East Coast, the Midwest, probably over there on the West. But right here in Riviera Beach, Florida, I'm going to be out in it. Going to wash the car right after the show. Maybe I should go do my pump and grind first. And then, get on back and watch the show. But I'll figure it out. Getting a little fluffy these days. So let's get right to it. Okay, so today's show, from the Psychology of Self, the psychcentral.com. That's PSYCHCENTRAL. Psychcentral.com. There's an article by Darius Sikanavicius. And I hope I didn't mess your name up, Darius. If I did, I humbly apologize, but I always want to make sure that I give credit where credit is due, because I didn't write this article. But the article title, Forgiveness, Apologizing, and Taking Responsibility, Fake versus Real. Fake versus real. Think about it. Oftentimes, we offer apologies for things we do, we don't do, say, don't say, and we don't follow up with action. and it will always be interpreted in the negative. And what I mean by that is we always judge those things that happened, did not happen, said, or were said negatively. We internalize it, we personalize it, and we all deal with situations. Just because you handle it this way doesn't mean that I'm going to handle it that way, and vice versa. And what we have is this big problem, and it's called expectations. And in most cases, they are unrealistic expectations of other people. Yeah, we want people, we expect people to react and act like we do in every situation. Anytime somebody does anything different than the way we do it, we react internally to it. It's automatic. It happens. You don't always have to say something about it. You don't always feel something deeply about it, but it's a natural thing. When you see somebody put ketchup on a pretzel, huh? What's the first thing you think? Ew, who puts who puts ketchup on a pretzel? Well, damn it, I do. I like ketchup and mustard on my pretzels. Have you ever tried it? Many of you probably haven't. But the first reaction, right, is ew. Who does that? I do. But it's the same thinking for me, where some people put ketchup on scrambled and fried eggs. Most disgusting thing I can think of. It just doesn't make sense. Eggs, ketchup. I don't get that one. But again, I don't react to it in a harsh, judgmental manner toward the person. It's just something I don't care for. And dislike is really a very rigid word to apply to that. It's just a matter of you like what you like. I like what I like. But when it comes to thoughts, when it comes to emotions, when it comes to actions, it's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different ball game because your thoughts are what drives your daily living. What you keep up here, what is already stored up here, causes the brain to react because there's a signal that is sent to the brain. Yo, that's nasty. I know she didn't just, I know he didn't just call me. I know. You look at all of those things, right? You ever heard the term the mind's eye? Well, it's legitimate. It's very authentic in itself. Because if you didn't have a mind and all you had was the brain that drove everything you do, where would it be stored? Just think for a minute. Where would that information be stored? Every time you open your eyes, you'll be doing something different. See, the brain is that motor, right? The heart is the pump. I want you to understand this. So I want you to remove the mind for a minute. I want you to remove the mind for a minute. Learning resides within the mind. When you hear people say that the person's mind is gone, they're functioning from the motor of the brain. Got me? When you take all that away from the person and just leave the mind, so take away everything else and just have the mind, nothing would function. Excuse me. I was up to 4:30 this morning. If I look a little rough, I'm sorry. But the mind has its own way of dealing with things. The mind is so powerful. And I heard this about 25 years ago. The mind is so powerful that it can manufacture, listen to this, it can manufacture additional pain. Yeah, that's how powerful the mind is. Now, what pain? Tell you, when you come into a situation with the person and it triggers a memory from a point in time in your life, a difficult point in time in your life. It's what we call trauma, right? It triggers that trauma within your mind because you're in this situation and it's reminiscent of such, and you do what's called rubber banding. I'm sorry, I'm just keep throwing out all these different terms, but if any of you have been counseled, if any of you are counselors, you need to know this because this is real important. Because everything begins with the thought, right? And the thought exists within the mind. Things that you think you forgot about, things you think you got better with, things you tell yourself you got better with are still there. So this event gets triggered. It has nothing to do with what's going on in the moment, but you have taken the past unconsciously, mind you, and you have brought it into the present. So you're not reacting off of the present. You are reacting off of the past. You understand what I'm saying to you? Again, another analogy. If you go and into the archives and you pull up the Mike Tyson fight. Now, I don't know how many of y'all saw a recent post of Mike on Instagram, throwing them fists. Mike is still wicked with them hands, right? But the first thing you think about is when you see Mike, he's still got it. What does he still got? You remember the fights. You remember all the knockouts. You remember the Buster Douglas fiasco. You remember all those things just by seeing Mike throw them hands. So just imagine, and it won't be difficult, when you are in a relationship with someone, just imagine how that relationship is being guided. This is why resolve is so important. This is why counseling is so important. This is why self-assessment, self-awareness is so important. Because we trigger things in each other. We trigger things in each other. And then when we react, the first thing we begin to feel is unloved, disrespected, not cared for, neglected. Now take this back to childhood. How many of us as children felt that way? Because remember, the child is totally self-centered. Totally self-centered. And some adults never grow out of that self-centeredness of a child. Some never grow out of it because they haven't learned to do that because of their environment, because of this dysfunctional family environment. And where do you see it most? Where do you see this dysfunction take place? Donald Trump. Perfect example. Perfect example. He grew up in an environment where people were irrelevant. Paper was most important. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Right, wrong, or indifferent. There are a lot of behaviors that we see. You're like, no, that's some stuff you'll see from a 5-year-old. What's up with that? But he's not the only one. We do it ourselves. If we have not healed, if we have not brought resolve, to those areas of our lives. So in this article, in talking about forgiveness, apologizing, and taking responsibility, real versus fake, it's not the fake as in being phony. It's not the fake as in being phony. If we don't get resolved within ourselves, if we don't put ourselves in alignment with the Creator, so we can steady ourselves, so we can find our balance, so we can establish a foundation, this stuff will continue to wreak havoc in our lives. See, people don't understand their own humanity. And this is where the confusion comes in, because people don't look at themselves as human beings. No. People are not looking at themselves as part of the creation, part of the order that's already been established. We look at ourselves as objects, as images. That's what we do. We put makeup on, we do all kinds of stuff to the hair and our bodies and our look, our image. Because that's how we see ourselves. The imagery is what keeps us insane. I don't care how mature you are. I don't care how much work you do on yourself. I don't care how much you think you're successful. If you do not have a foundation of living that is in alignment to the best of your ability with the Creator, you have separated yourself from the creation and you are acting unlike you are intended to be. I want you to be very clear on that. Because if you're not clear on that, you're going to keep going down this road over and over and over again with no resolve. And when your life ends, because it will end, because the process of death begins at conception. I'll let you marinate on that one. The process of death begins at conception. Yeah. Now, we can talk about another death, right? Because there's the murder, right? There's the time, right? But don't forget about the spiritual death. Yeah. Because the spiritual death is what so many are walking around with today. They're not even existing. They're just there. They're just making it day to day. Oblivious to themselves. Oblivious to what's going on around them. But we see ourselves as images. No matter the alignment, you can be in total alignment with your Creator, but you still see yourself as an image. When I started looking at myself and seeing myself as a servant, when I started looking at myself as the slave to the Creator, my life began to change. Because then there's responsible living that takes place. You can't open the door for responsible living. You can't until you get yourself in alignment. It's not going to happen. I'm not telling you to profess any religion. I'm simply telling you that when you think you are it, you will never see what you truly are. You will call yourself an actor. You will call yourself I'm an athlete. You will call yourself a clinician. We have these titles on ourselves, right? But when you conduct yourself as the clinician, I'm a clinician. I've been a clinician for 25 years, right? But I see myself as a servant. So what I do as a clinician is servitude. When I do the work that I do on film, on video, it's servitude. Ain't about me. It's me learning. I do these articles and I just peruse the article. I can't tell you its full content, but when I look at it, I know as a human being that it's relevant. But what's the first thing it does when I look at the article? It triggers in my mind. When you know you're not alone, when you know you're not the only one, it becomes easier. When people think what they're going through is unique to just them, that's where the problem metamorphosizes into things such as clinical depression, thoughts of suicide, thoughts of homicide. Yeah, that's what it does. So when I'm doing these articles, I'm learning with you. I'm giving you clinical perspectives. I'm giving you personal experience. I'm giving you academic knowledge. That's what makes me a master of human services. Yeah, not just because I have the degree, but I have mastered an understanding. And guess what? All the academic studies that I had, science, psychology, sociology, all those things, right? When I start reading the Quran, whatever your choice of book is yours. Spiritual books, whatever they are. But when I start reading the Quran, I started seeing all that knowledge come to life. But if you're not reading for yourself, if you're allowing somebody to stand before you, if you're watching videos of somebody else and you're going out regurgitating what they said, you're not learning. You're not. You're not. If that was the case when you went to school, you didn't have homework. You wouldn't have books in front of you. You wouldn't have any of those things because you're going to let that teacher stand in front of the class, absorb that information, and go on with your business. It's not that way, folks. And that's why I love so much studying under Imam Abdul Alim in Philly. I miss those classes. You know, I miss his spirit. You know, he always said to us when we went to our studies, read for yourself. And we would come back to class and we would share our interpretation, our understanding of a thing. And never once were we told, no, that's wrong. Because you have to read and you get an understanding that's befitting for your soul. So you say, well, Sabir, I'm hearing you. So what does that have to do with forgiveness, apologizing, and taking responsibility? Real versus fake. I'm going to tell you. Let's go into the article. So to the article. We all have been wronged. And all of us have probably wronged someone else at some point. Unavoidably, people interact with one another and are sometimes hurt or hurt others. When a person wrongs another, the trust between them is compromised. That's important to understand. When a person wrongs another, what was the wrong? Intentional or unintentional? It doesn't matter. And a lot of times people get caught up with, well, that's how you saw it. You're right. That is how I saw it. And how I saw it, how I see it is important. And how you react to how I saw it is important. Because in my relationship with you, I give of myself to you. I share things about myself with you. We have dialogue about things. Through the course of the time we're together, you'll hear me say something to the effect of, you know what? I really don't like when people do that. And instead of you taking that information, right? Hold on. This is important. Instead of you taking the information that I just gave to you, I just told you what I didn't like. You look at it as just a conversation instead of looking at it as this is important to him. This is important to her. I need to make sure I keep that in here. Where? In my mind, not in my brain. I need to keep that in my mind about him or her. Because they just said, I don't like when people do that. So why would you do it? Because what was said, you didn't internalize it as significant to the person. So that's where the bond come in. You internalize it as a conversation. And what the other thing that happened in that was, in your mind, you thought, well, what's wrong with it? Why has he got such an issue with that? Why should she get mad about that? That is an important piece in an interaction between people. Because we say we see red flags, but then there are red flags we don't see. Because it's not significant to us. It's not significant to us. Because we didn't think it was significant to this relationship. Everything that a person says is significant to the relationship. Therefore, when we get a reaction from the other person that triggers something in our mind, it didn't happen in that moment necessarily. It happened in here, in the mind. And the mind brought to the present the past. And what happens then is, because it talks about here, is the truth, the trust between them is compromised. Now I'm afraid to give you something. Now I'm afraid to disclose myself to you. Now I'm afraid to have intimate dialogue with you because of how you just reacted. Because how you just reacted. But mind you, again, it has nothing to do with the present. It's not the person in front of you. It's you. Excuse me. It's you. We all do it. We all do it. And again, it goes back to resolve. And we'll talk about that a little further in the show. But once that trust is compromised, everything changes about that relationship. Everything changes. Back to the article. Depending on the relationship and the severity of the wrongdoing or wrongdoings, it is sometimes possible for the perpetrator, the wrongdoer, to make restitution with the aggrieved party, the one who's the subject of the less endearing trait of that person. That's the aggrieved party, right? And the root word is grieve, right? Aggrieved, grieve, grief. Okay? I want you to understand that. The perpetrator is the doer, the conductor of the wrong behavior. And when you're wrong, right, you grieve, right? You don't have to boo-hoo, cry, and snot, but there's a withdrawal from the circumstance. There's an emotional upheaval in that circumstance. Sometimes it can only be achieved partially. We're talking about the restitution piece. Sometimes it can only be achieved partially. And sometimes it is impossible to restore any substantial level of trust. See, we really have to understand this piece, because we wonder why some people just cut people off. Yeah, because trust is important, but the distrust has nothing to do with me. If I didn't do anything, right? You know I didn't do anything, but there's something within here, something within the mind that told you I wronged you. Something from your past. Remember this, folks. I'm going to keep saying it over and over again. When that happens, you are bringing the past into the present. And the past is what's running your life, not the present. Because you are ruining the present because of your past. You know how when like formerly incarcerated folks that come home and they'll be subjected to all kind of scrutiny, ostracization, and all kind of negativity because they've been to prison because they've committed a crime, and then they come home and then society, so unforgiving, pun intended, so unforgiving, not seeking to make restitution. Think about it, because that's what the act is. Because I've committed a crime, I come back home. I call it home. You want me to pay restitution for what I've done. But even after my restitution is paid, you make none as a society. Why? Well, the society has a mind too. It has a mindset. As a system. The system has a mindset of how people who have violated societal norms, who have gone and been put in prison, the system, the society as a whole, its own mind, be it Republican or Democrat, because these are the minds, they have concluded that you don't deserve anything. And then they'll make restitution. So there's an ongoing battle, an ongoing fight for restoration of rights of the formerly incarcerated. Right? You understand what I'm saying? It's the same thing that happens in a relationship. The same exact thing that happens in a relationship. If I do something wrong and you tell me it was wrong, this is who I am today, right? I'll try to make restitution. I'm apologetic about it. I say it. I think I'm following through with the right action to restore that trust. But you have already convinced yourself by your past in the present that it's not enough. That's why it says here, it is sometimes possible for the perpetrator to make restitution to the aggrieved party. Sometimes it can only be achieved partially. So you'll let me back in. But you store it here. You store it here. And people often say, why do you keep bringing that up? Why do you keep bringing that up? Because it's stored here. Because you are reminding me of, because you are triggering that event. You are triggering that event. That's why it says, so it can be achieved partially. So partially, you'll be able to see some evidence of restitution offered, being received and accepted. Partially. You still don't get everything. It's never going to be the way it used to be. It's unfortunate. It will never be the way it used to be. Once broken, it will never, ever be the way it used to be. Period. Period. Once you break something, you can get glue and you can put it back together, piece it back together, and it's whole, but you still see the evidence of the break. The evidence of that break resides within our minds. It resides within our minds. It doesn't go anywhere, folks. Everything that took place in the womb to date resides within the mind. And dig this. Everything in your lineage gets gets filtered through into you. Now, you don't come through with every aspect of the lineage, but you come through with varied things. You have a predisposition for certain cancers, other ailments, alcoholism, substance abuse, anxiety, depression, and other disorders. You have a predisposition for those things, right? So every time you come from one relationship to the next, to the next, to the next, I mean from infancy up, all of those relationships have left a mark in the mind. Yeah, they've left a mark in the mind. So it goes on to say that it is sometimes impossible to restore any substantial level of trust. When you look at that happening, what you have to look at is this. You need some healing, some serious, deep healing. You need it. And that is only possible. And I'm saying it directly. That is only possible through spiritual healing, right? You got to ease your mind. You got to take a look at your thinking. You have to learn some techniques to stop allowing that past to run your present. It takes counseling. It takes work. It takes commitment. If you don't apply it, you will see yourself losing everything around you. You will see yourself losing everybody around you. But most importantly, what you won't see is you losing you. When you get to the peak of that dissatisfaction, that's when you see that you're losing yourself. You look up and wonder how you got there. But it all ties back to that trust is gone. That relationship is gone. People often equate trust with fidelity. And if you violate it, it's called infidelity. But people often equate trust with fidelity. Why? Because it goes back to the interpretation of oneself. Image. Image. You see yourself as an image. And images are always beautified. So that means you could be toe up from the flow up and always smiling and dressed real nice. And toe up inside. Toe up inside. Back to the article. For example, if I'm carrying a heavy box and accidentally hit my neighbor's flower pot with it and break it, then I cause them some damage. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter if it was too heavy, talking about the box, or that I didn't see the flower pot, or that I was distracted, or that it was too dark, or anything else. The damage is as it is regardless. Period. See, that's why I'm not talking about intentional or unintentional. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's intentional or unintentional. It doesn't matter. It was an accident. It doesn't matter. Back to articles. I want you to hear the rest of this. I can take responsibility for it. Still talking about that heavy box and the flower pot being broken. I can take responsibility for it. Apologize. Pay for the damages. Promise and actually try to be more careful in the future. And depending on how the neighbor feels towards me afterwards, the trust between us will hopefully be restored. You feel what I'm saying here? See, it has nothing to do with you. Listen to what I'm saying to y'all, right? It's real important here. Because the only way that we can make it through difficult situations is if we take a look at ourselves. We take a look at ourselves. I'm always looking to heal. When I read this, even reading it now, it's in my mind. The challenges I'm dealing with in my mind today, in my life. I'm looking at this article, and I'm like, wow, it's because it's real. No pun intended to the title, but it's real. Forgiving, apologizing, and taking responsibility. The other person doesn't have to take responsibility. You have to take responsibility. You have to take responsibility. And it says it. I paid for it. I apologize for it. Excuse me. I hope you forgive me. But if you don't, you carry that. Because forgiveness is not for me. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is never for the other person. It's when I say I forgive you, it's typically said to the person so the other person can feel less guilt. You understand what I'm saying? I'm just trying to give you a sense of what forgiveness is. If you did something to me and I say, listen, I forgive you for that. Am I telling you I forgive you because I want to retain, sustain, maintain that relationship? Or am I telling you for my own benefit? Or is it both? You see how deep this gets? Because I can tell you I forgive you because I have my own agenda. Because I still want you, a thing from you, something from you. I want you to continue to do this, whatever it is for my benefit. I can tell you that I forgive you because I do. I want you to, know that I forgave you for it. But my mind still retains it. But I care about you. And if I care about you, I want to let you know, listen, I forgive you. Right? But then the other part is, do I want to carry that? Do I want to be unforgiving and carry that? That person doesn't feel it. Resentment is like pissing on yourself. Don't nobody feel it but you. Nobody feels it but you. They're going on with their lives all hunky-dory and doing their thing, and you all balled up in a knot. You walking around with a wedgie that goes from your behind up to your mind. Yeah. And resentments, it turns into anger. It turns into rage. It doesn't just sit as a resentment. It has cousins. Anger, rage, guilt, shame, embarrassment, and so on and so forth. It has all those things that come along with it. Do you really want to take that around every day? Many of us do. Back to the article. Sorry, y'all. I keep wiping my eyes like I'm still trying to wake up. I really apologize. I'm looking a little scruffy this morning. Okay. Back to the article. Still talking about the broken pot. Now, this is a very simple example where the damage is very clear and the relationship is not that complex, right? The perpetrator accepts responsibility for their actions. I was wrong. I apologize. I paid for it. I bought you a new one. I fixed it. I cleaned the glass up. I did all those things. But that wasn't enough for you. Makes restitution. and doesn't repeat it in the future, usually it's not so smooth and simple. Why? Because every time I come outside onto my patio and I see that empty space where my flower pot used to be, I go through feelings about it. And what's the first thing I do? This happened in 1996. It's 2018. Well, I mean, I know it's 2019. Don't tell me I'm just kind of throwing some years out, using an analogy. And I'm still in the same space. I'll never forget it. I may have brought some resolve to it. It never goes away. It's always right there. I will always remember it. And we tend to remember things when there's an emotional attachment to it. I want you to think about it for a minute. Because if you remembered everything in life that has ever happened to you, just think of what your life would be like. I'm telling you, listen, man. I'm telling you about the magnificence, the beneficence of the Creator, man. I mean, just you can't even conceptualize how your mind is created. Your brain is created, right? To short circuit itself so you don't go on overload. It short circuits itself and it blocks out particular areas of our lives that have happened that have been so traumatic. It blocks it out. You forget about it until a trigger comes. You can't even conceptualize that, man. But just think, here I am, 58, almost 59 years old. Just think if everything that ever happened to me in my life, I remembered. Do you realize, do you understand the level of insanity a person would be in? Every little thing that ever happened is always in the forefront of your mind. Just think about that for a minute, man. Think about how your creation protects you from going insane. Can you understand what I'm saying to you? You can't even conceptualize that. You can't. Just think for a minute, all the things that you may have going on in your life. And some people got a whole lot of stuff going on in their lives. Just think you got all these things going on in your life. What it feels like to you. Just think what it feels like. You know, you don't have to think hard. You know what it feels like. What are you telling yourself about all this that's going on? What are you telling yourself? What are you feeling? What actions do you want to take? You really need to, no, let me change that. If you want to improve, learn something about your humanity. Learn something about your personal growth and development. But that's a hard thing to do because it's easier to point fingers at other people. It's easier to tell the other person it's them. It's easier to blame everybody around you for your condition when you're responsible for your own condition. That's what this article is talking about. That forgiving, apologizing, and taking responsibility, real or fake. Because the fake part is the part that you need to acknowledge. You need to acknowledge the fake part. And what I mean by fake is that if you're not self-aware, if you're not looking at you, if you're always looking at somebody else, that's fake. Because you're avoiding your own self. You're avoiding your own self. And then when somebody says something to you about it, you become defensive. That's what we do. Because we don't want to face the reality of our own selves. Because for some, again, reality can become so painful that oblivion is preferable. Oblivion is the act of forgetting. See, there are things that we are protected by within ourselves that just happen, not because of our denial, not because of anything else other than it is so traumatic to us. Why is it so traumatic to us? It's so traumatic to us because there's so much unresolved related to all these other events. It's a whole string of events that we shut down because we can't handle it. We can't handle it. So when you hear people use the term that God will never put upon us more than we can handle, more than we can bear, that's the part. That's the humanity. That's your humanness. That's the part you're missing. That's the part you're missing. But it's self-imposed stuff. See, that gets blocked. That gets protected because you can't handle that. This is why it's so important that you begin to bring resolve. See, when those things get triggered, they may not come out full force, but it's triggered. That protected event is triggered. You don't know where it's coming from because it's protected. And then one day in your counseling session, one day in a particular circumstance, you just fall the hell apart. You fall apart. And don't know why. And then it begins to gradually come to you. That's why in counseling, it's the process of taking somebody through on that particular day. What do you remember? Not about the event that happened. What was going on around you? Who was there? What activity was it? What was significant about that activity to you? What did you smell? See if you can, that smell, what do you remember smelling? And you're not even talking about the actual event that happened. You're talking about everything that happened around it. This is some psychotherapy stuff, right? Understand that's what psychotherapy is, the psyche. Providing therapy to the psyche. Back to the article. Man, it's 10 o'clock already. Well, I'm not going to stop. I want to go a few more minutes, and just bear with me. Why it is so hard for people to take responsibility is the next section of this article. Some people have a really hard time taking responsibility for their actions, while others apologize profusely. Excuse me. And take responsibility for things that they are not even responsible for. Both of these behaviors are not constructive. You should only take responsibility for the things you are actually responsible for. Correspondingly, you should not avoid responsibility for the things that you are responsible for. Let me read that piece again. And we're going to wrap it up with this paragraph. Some people have a really hard time taking responsibility for their actions. Later in the article, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to the whole piece, the why, all those things, those cousins that I was talking to you about, of resentment, shame, guilt, embarrassment, all those kind of things like that. We're going to talk about that. But you have to understand, again, some people have a really hard time taking responsibility for their actions. I was one of those people. And I can be one of those people on any given day like anybody else. But I was one of those people who had it embedded within himself that I was so wronged as a child. It wasn't the way I wanted it to be, but remember, the child is totally self-centered. Our creation is as such. We have the id, the ego and the superego. The id is that part of self that exists from conception to death. It never changes. That's that selfish. I don't care who gets hurt. I want what I want, and I want it now. I don't care. Give it to me. I don't care if somebody's hurt by it. It's what I want. That's the id. And if you're not familiar with the id, the ego, and the superego, Google it. Id, I-D. Just Google id. Don't confuse it with the EID, right, of the celebration of Muslims, right? Id, I-D. Okay? Look it up. So this isn't new stuff. But when you are totally self-centered as a child, and your ego, which is the part that brings balance to the superego, which is your morality. But the ego has the responsibility of controlling the id. But if the ego is not properly developed, empathy, caring, loving, compassion, right? Those things are your ego. So when people say you're being egotistical, that's wrong. Look it up. When you look at the Sigmund Freud's stages of human development, you'll get that understanding. You'll see what it is I'm talking about. So stop just kind of running with things all the time. That's why we got to read for ourselves. But when the ego and the superego do what it's supposed to do, the id doesn't run your life. The id doesn't run your life. But when those things, when your morality and your compassion and your caringness for other people is wavering, the id is in full control because it don't waver. It stays on point. Trust me. So, and it goes on to say, while others apologize profusely, I've done it. Right? I've done it. And I'm apologizing in so many cases. I have found myself apologizing to somebody for their behavior and taking ownership of their stuff. They call it codependency. I learned that about myself last year. That I was codependent. Yeah. And it's easier to say it today because I'm working on that part of myself. And I did a show on codependency, but I'm going to do another show on codependent relationships and why some people remain in codependent relationships. Right? But I learned last year through doing the show with y'all. Through doing a show with y'all, I did a show on codependency. And I came to the conclusion, right, in that show. Damn. I'm codependent. I'm codependent. Codependent people take ownership for other people's stuff for a variety of reasons. And we'll go into that in the show. But it says here, while others apologize profusely and take responsibility for things that they are not even responsible for. It's your thinking. It's your behavior. Why the hell am I taking ownership for it? Because I want you to love me. I want you to stay with me. I don't want you to leave me. Where did that come from? Childhood. Childhood events. That's why people have to really understand what parental separation does to a child. That's what made me start Daddy's Right Here Incorporated, a nonprofit family services organization that seeks to decrease parental absenteeism. That's why. Because I was abandoned as a child. My mother made a conscious decision to get the hell away from a man who was abusing her physically and emotionally. Yeah, she made that decision. And my mother never stopped me from seeing my father. Never stopped me. But I had been exposed to him, and at that time, may Allah, bless him. He's deceased now. He was murdered, right? When I went to see him, he was alcoholic at that time, and the same behavior that I recollected in my childhood. Now mind you, they separated when I was 5. They separated when I was 5. But the same behavior I saw in his other household. Therefore, I had my own opinion about him. Didn't want to see him. Didn't want to see him. But parental separation, right, is devastating to a child. We're going to stop here today. It went a few minutes over, and I appreciate y'all hanging in. But we're going to finish off from this spot in 2 weeks. And again, for those of you who are not aware, Daddy's Right Here was typically a show that I would do every Sunday, right? But because I'm doing so many things, I don't always have the capacity to adequately, passionately, effectively do a show, because I'm working on finishing up my second film, starting the third film, because the third film, Words from the Wise, the Boyhood Chronicles, I want to have released December 24th of this year. I'm still working on the book, Why Are You My Ex? Right? I'm always doing some things. And I got to, you got to find balance with whatever it is that you do. Because if you overwhelm yourself, you can't give to those things that you want to be masterfully done. You just can't devote your time adequately to them. So I have to, manage the time that I'm giving to each one of those things. Because as things come up, for me, what I do is I got a digital recorder. So what I turn around and do is I turn around and I'll say it, recite it on the digital recorder, or I'll write a note for myself somewhere, and I'll get back to it, and I'll put the information that I'm looking for into, what it is that I'm doing. But listen, there's a lot of work to be done on self. Some people spend more time working on another person because they don't want to work on themselves. And not saying they don't want to work on themselves because they're lazy, because they're being... Listen, there's a reason why. There's a reason why. That's why when, the show is headed response ability. See, the title of the article is one thing. The title of the show is totally different. But response ability is key. Y'all have a great day. And as always, you can be doing anything else on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock than listening to my mouth. I appreciate you. I love you. Listen, I'll see y'all 2 weeks. Remember, Daddy's Right Here Live. It's a bi-weekly show, right? I will see you in 2 weeks right here. And we're going to finish up this discussion. Yeah, this discussion on forgiveness, apologizing, and taking responsibility. Real versus fake. Y'all have a great day. Peace.